Today we're here to talk about something extremely important to each one of us here, whether we're Ghanaian or not. Once we are in this country, there are a set of laws by which we must abide. When the process was begun in 2010, by the time it ended in 2012, over 83,000 submissions had been taken from Ghanaians. Over 500 individual issues had been captured in those submissions. Over 72 sub-themes from those issues had been identified, and over 12 central themes had been identified.
That Constitution Review Commission received in total some $6.7 million to do its work. It claims, and I have no reason to doubt those claims, that it went around the country, knocked on people's doors, spoke to them one-on-one. Unfortunately, they didn't reach any of the members of my family, not in my village, and not in Accra or in Kumasi. They spoke to civil society organizations, which I'm aware of, in groups. They reached out to 170 plus administrative districts. They spoke to ex-presidents. They spoke to ex-vice president and sitting presidents. They spoke to the speakers of parliament. They engaged parliament itself, civil society organizations, the Chief Justice, and judges. Now, when they were done with their work, they gave us a 1,000-page document. That document was then submitted to the president on the 20th of December 2011. After that, on the 15th of June 2012, the president issued a white paper. My problem has been with that white paper and what it did to the 1,000-page document. That white paper claims to have accepted without any hesitation over 90% of the recommendations that were made by the Constitution Review Commission. Yet I find that the little that it did not accept, or the few areas that it did not accept, rather constitutes the most important aspects to me. My beef concludes on the note that the white paper should have no place as far as the recommendations of the Constitution Review Commission are concerned. It is totally misplaced, and the white paper ought to be rejected.
We've had two government from the two main factions of the political class have tried the Constitution, they've governed under it, and so we are in the position now to assess its workings and to make proposal for reform. And I think there's a certain consensus that on the substance there's a need to change the Constitution. I think what that has caused us to do is that we have become too focused on the substance to the point of not paying equal attention to the process. So I think process matters for a number of reasons. Right? One, the process matters because, of course, the process can subvert the substance. The process does inform the content of the final document that we get. And process matters here also importantly because we're setting a precedent here. This is the first time we're doing a comprehensive review of the Constitution with the prospect of amending it by referendum, amending the so-called entrenched clauses of the Constitution. We have in the past, in this republic, amended the non-entrenched clauses in 1996, and then we tried again in 1998. But this is the first time we're actually we're looking at the Constitution as a whole, the constitutional framework as a whole, to see if indeed we need to fix certain portions of it. And one aspect of our business as usual approach to this is that in the midst of all of this inattention to process, we've allowed the default rule that applies in Ghana all the time, which is when we don't know how to do something, well, let the president do it. So here we are, the president gets to initiate this thing. Right? The president gets to initiate it. When you do that, of course, then the president gets to set the agenda. So he chooses a commission of 9. He gives them their terms of reference. And of course, something is aggrieved about the president, then later on coming back into the picture and saying, thank you for your nice report, but I pick and choose which ones I'll give to my Attorney General to put in a bill. Well, that comes with the territory, right? Once you allow the president to invoke his commission of inquiry powers as the means by which this process is going to be initiated and driven, you of course ceded to him the power to issue a white paper and to handpick or select from the report which parts that he thought fit to give to his Attorney General to draft a bill. Of all the possible candidates in terms of who must do this, who is the right person to do this, which is the right body or institution to do this, I think the president is the worst possible candidate to do this. And I'll give you 4 quick reasons why. Since 1969, the entire chapter on the executive is entrenched. Why? So who are we entrenching that against? We are entrenching that against the president. We are making provisions pertaining to term limits, provisions pertaining to the exercise of presidential power, provisions pertaining to executive entrenched, so that the person who exercises those powers under that chapter will not have a free hand to drive the agenda to change it. Right? So that's one reason why I think he's the worst possible candidate for this. Our history tells us that it was indeed against him that we were trying to actually entrench these clauses. That very office is the one that we fear the most. The second reason why I think it's a bad idea is that constitutional amendments must be seen as a national project. It is a national project. It is not a party project. When you let the president drive the project, drive the agenda, it is very difficult to disassociate that agenda from a party agenda, because the president represents but one party. If it were Parliament, for example, that was driving the agenda, we would at least be sure that it was a multi-party body, it was more representative of the country, diversity in many ways. But when you have just the presidency doing it, under our constitution, the president has all of the executive power of the state. That person is one person, can only represent the president and one branch of government. And the third reason is related to the second one, which is that the president alone in our political system has the kind of resources, the kind of aggregation of resources that can be abused. No matter how unpopular an idea is, if you are a president and you really want it in our African context, you really, really want it, you have enough resources to actually drive it. And the final point on why the president is the worst possible candidate to drive this agenda is comparative lesson, the lesson of history, not just our history, but generally speaking. Just look across. It just recently happened in Burkina Faso, right? When you give the president the power to be the one to initiate this thing, to be the one to sit in the driver's seat, to drive the agenda, to determine the content, to determine what goes to parliament to be voted upon, to determine what goes to a referendum, you are trusting too much to one person. We've seen the danger that has caused in many African countries, where attempts have been made by incumbent presidents to extend their term, to vary the constitution in ways that shore up their power, to dilute countervailing powers of other institutions. That is a tendency that we see across. So I think that in the light of all of these experiences, both human experiences as well as our own, we should be very, very, very cautious how we proceed on the process.
In 1992, a great majority of the citizenry of the Republic voted in a referendum to approve this constitution. Many of them were not happy with the transitional provisions, but were eager to get onto a constitutional regime, and therefore we voted for that, even though the transitional provisions had been lumped with the constitution. We proceeded. That constitution put in place chapter 25, which is, as Professor Kokwasai calls it, the amendment architecture of the constitution. Now, today we are faced with the issue of whether the president can appoint a commission of inquiry and subvert the powers, the clear specific powers set up under chapter 25 of the constitution to amend the constitution. Arguments have been made that because that particular issue is of public interest, the president has the authority to set up commissions of inquiry to begin to go around looking for views of the citizenry on how to bring up an amendment of the constitution. Now, in this forward march towards our constitutional amendment, we must ask ourselves whether the president indeed does have that power. If you look at the constitution, especially the chapter 25 architecture, you will clearly see that specific provisions have been made there with respect to the amendment of the constitution. Any other thinking that the president could rely on the general provisions of the constitution to override the specific provisions must be very tedious thinking. Parliament comprises a broad milieu of the republic. Every particular person is represented in Parliament, including the president. And therefore, the president is entitled to lobby his member of Parliament with respect to proposals to amend the constitution. But it is not for the president to initiate amendment to the constitution. We must make it clear to all the citizenry, and the word must go out from here to Gambaga, to Yoso, to Kita, and to Accra. It's very important that everybody understands this. That once we begin to think that the president, who is a creature of the constitution, can amend the constitution in a manner that fits him or suits him, we've begun to go very awry and weak for that matter. Once again, the amendment of the constitution itself should be looked up against the background of our constitutional experience, where we have moved from very military regimes, dictatorial regimes, to a system which is now known as constitutionalism. You and I know that after the CRC did its work, they set up this Constitutional Review Implementation Committee. There is no part of the Constitution that anticipates, embraces, or gives birth to a Constitutional Review Implementation Committee. It's alien, completely foreign to the Constitution. And yet, we are being told in this republic today that it's the Constitutional Review Implementation Committee that has gone round, breeded, and then sieved the proposals for the attention of Cabinet to be able to tell us which part of the Constitution is to be amended. A constitutional amendment, to be constitutional, to be valid, to ensure constitutionalism, must always be done and carried out in accordance with the rules specified by the Constitution. We must ask ourselves as a nation, as a people who are learned, as people who practice the law, and those who are in the forefront of pushing this legislation or this tedious practice through, whether we are conforming with the procedure set out by the Constitution. The Constitution speaks of a bill to amend the Constitution. It doesn't speak of a bill to amend provisions or bills to amend. The reason why I speak this language is because if you see the format in which the government wants to push this amendment, it's all been lumped together. So you will see 34 amendments of the Constitution in one bill, entrenched provisions in one bill. If I, Akufu, want to vote, and I see 7 of them I'm not happy with them, and I see 26 of them I'm happy with them, how do I vote? In conclusion, that the president does not have the power to set up a constitutional review commission to initiate the process. That the setting up of a constitutional review implementation commission is completely discredited, is weak, is not acceptable, is fundamentally deficit, and ought not to be countenanced by any right-thinking person of this republic and our foreign friends as well. I also believe that the earlier we stop this process, the better, because we've spent, I believe when this thing started, we sank in $3 million, $6 million, thank you. We have children who do not go to school in this republic because they can't even feed.